Okay, so good morning, everybody. This is George Aguilar from the Crystal Clear podcast. And in this series of talks now, we would like to explore uh, different ideas now regarding one's journey to enlightenment, no? If you want to call it that. And last meeting, we were talking about the dangers of idealism, which is, no, as we have described it, the danger actually lies in solipsism. So, what is solipsism again? Solipsism is the idea that because everything that we know, that I know, stems from my being conscious of it. No, it presupposes two things. That number one, the universe, no, as it appears to me, is just contained in my consciousness. Without my consciousness, the universe will not be. Okay. And because I am the one who is conscious, and that is the mistake, no, of solipsism, no, thinking that there's a separate self that is conscious of everything else, no, then the I or I, no, me, the one conscious, no, is in the center of this universe. And you can easily see how dangerous this idea is. Okay. For one thing, it gives us the idea that I alone exist. So what about our families? What about our friends? What about our classmates? What about everybody else? We reduce them into just figments of our imagination. So they're just creations, no, that we have created, no, in order to craft a reality, no, as we wanted it to be. Okay. And of course, no, the danger here is to start thinking like we are God or that we are gods and that we can create the universe according to our sentiments, according to our capricho, our whims. Okay. And so this has led into some thinking like we can manifest actually anything. If we want the universe to be like this or like that, we can simply just, through the power of our will, make it so that we can attract success, we can attract fortune, we can attract fame, we can even attract love, no? Just by the power of our will. And in the last podcast, no, I've said that there's no truth to this because all of these things, no, number one, all of these things are products of karma, you know, or karmic causes and conditions. We cannot just get away from our karma. We cannot just create things, no, but we have to deal with the karmic consequences of our past actions and also the conditions that we find ourselves in. I have tried to do that, no? I mean, who would not be interested or attracted to the idea that I can simply manifest the things that I desire? That would be like magic. And I've tried to do that. I've tried to attract luck. I've tried to attract wealth. And of course, no, it didn't happen. Not the way I wanted it to be. Of course, no, with a positive mindset, we can actually solve many of the problems that we encounter. But we simply cannot attract a certain condition. We have to abide by the world, no? And by the world, no, I mean the world, no, not just as it appears to us, no, but the actual conditions that have been coming about. The world is a process, and so is the self. And we will talk about this, no, in a while. Okay. So the problem of extreme idealism is the tendency to lead into a solipsism. Now, does it mean to say that the opposite of idealism is a better alternative? Empiricism, for lack of a better word, is the idea that everything that we know stems from our experience, no, through our senses. Okay, that we know of the world, we know of the external world, no, through our perceptions. Okay, the senses, and this in itself, no, is incomplete. Although there's some truth in idealism, and there is also some truth in empiricism. The danger in empiricism is to think that, well, number one, you know, that the world is just a material object, something mechanical, something that we can understand, through analysis and make it conform to our will. Okay. And we've been doing that with technology. We've been trying to reshape nature to serve our needs. Okay. For such a long time that we have been very destructive of nature. And also, this leads to a materialism which is based on the false premise that matter by itself can give us happiness. It can give us meaning. And so a lot of people have tried to do that. Okay. So instead of being idealistic or purely spiritual, if you want to call it that, in empiricism, we emerge into the world of matter, thinking that material substances alone can make us happy. Well, they can satisfy our bodily needs. I mean, it is true that we have to eat, that we have to consume, that we have to sleep, and that we need to have a home, or we need shelter. We need all of these things. But to think that this alone will make us happy has proven time and time again that doesn't work that way. We have a lot of billionaires who have lost meaning in their lives, and who have committed suicide because they were so unhappy. Okay. And also, come to think about it, the more you rely on material things to satisfy our inner needs, it becomes insatiable. The more we need more, we need more. Okay. Just like a drug. Okay. For example, a certain amount of drugs can make us happy, but in the next hit, you need a little bit more, every time, in order to get that hit, or the pleasure, that comes about, through that kind of chemical consumption. Okay, even just the desire for money. Okay, it's never enough. At first, I thought that having 100 pesos in my pocket is okay. Okay. Then after that, 100 pesos not enough. No, I will need 1,000 pesos, perhaps. No, a daily allowance of 1,000, but it's not enough. Also, a daily allowance of 1,000 pesos just good for 1 or 2 meals, or perhaps a movie. Not even enough to buy groceries. I remember that 1,000 pesos would be sufficient for 1 week's supply of groceries, for my upkeep. But now 5,000 pesos is not enough. Okay, I could actually I actually bought more with 1,000 pesos before than uh 5,000 pesos worth of grocery right now. Well, because of inflation, because of all of these things. But the point here is that material objects do not give us satisfaction, because it's not what we're actually looking for. All beings want happiness, and part of that is to be freed from suffering. But as we have learned, in our journey towards enlightenment, the more we grasp at things, the more we suffer. Why? Because it's never enough. Okay. And the basic reason for this is that what we're looking for is something that is non-material. We're actually looking for meaning. We're actually looking for bliss. We're actually looking for peace. But the material world does not give that. It gives a lot of benefits, but it will not give you, ultimately, it will not give you what you're looking for. Okay? So that's another danger, no? The danger is that the material world is not actually all that there is. It will not give us satisfaction, and it will actually lead to more grasping, more clinging, more attachments, which will end up with a lot more suffering. Okay. Now, thirdly, to think that the material world is all that there is. is actually an illusion in itself, because the latest scientific findings, no, have have seen matter for what it is. That actually the material world is not actually matter as we know it, no, composed of solid things, no, composed of uh, molecules, no, three-dimensional objects, no, that we find in nature, that we find in man-made environments. Okay, because all of these things can be reduced into subatomic particles, strings even. Okay, uh, it is actually more correct to say that matter is actually not just that matter is no longer material, or no longer just material. Okay? Uh, and the latest findings, as I've read, no, the latest readings that I've had regarding this phenomena, is that this material energy actually it actually it can be influenced, no, by our thoughts, by our will. Okay, not in the solipsistic sense, no, but actually uh it sorts of like it communicates, no, we can actually uh influence, no, this so there is an interconnection between the material world, no, as energy, no, or frequencies, no, and ourselves. Okay, now also part of the illusion is that the material world is separate from us. So this is the same mistake, no, that idealists made when they tried to say that everything is just part of my consciousness. So the mistake there is actually dualism, forming a distinction between the person who is conscious and consciousness itself. And in fact, no, Alan Watts, following the Buddha's teaching, have said, no, that when you're conscious, there's never a person who is conscious. I myself now fall into that trap. No, I was saying, no, that when I meditate, I try to be mindful of my feelings, my thoughts, my ideas. Okay. So there must be someone who is looking at the thoughts, the ideas, no, that arise in my mind, no, when I'm meditating, or even when I'm just thinking, no, deeply. Uh, when you actually think about it, when we are conscious, that's all that there is, no, just the consciousness, just the consciousness of things, no. There's never an I that is actually conscious. Okay, so the idealism, no, which has led to monism for the ancient Greeks, no, is still dualistic in a sense, no. And of course, no, empiricism is also guilty of that, no, guilty of trying to create a dualism. Okay, that not only is the world material, but I am material too, and that we are both distinct. That the world, no, has nothing to do with me, and I can actually manipulate the world, no, as I want it, no, given science and technology, and of course resources, no, like money. So the idea here is that both, no, but especially empiricism leads to a duality. And the duality, no, number one, it's false. When we look at things, no, either as sensory perceptions or experiences, as with the empiricist, or as pure consciousness, no, as with the idealist, no, the tendency to create another person or another entity that is conscious, or that who experiences the material world, no, has led into a lot of mistakes, no, in the way we have to understand things. Okay, Ludwig Wittgenstein, I remember, said that all philosophical problems are just a problem of language. Okay, the I actually that is not there. No, you cannot see it. You cannot see any evidence of someone who is distinct from consciousness or even experience. It's simply not there, no matter how hard you investigate. Okay, but we create the idea of I, okay, because of the way our language is. Okay, when we say, for example, seeing, there must be a seer, but is there really a need for a seer? Isn't it true that seeing is just seeing, and that's all there is? So why go through the problem of creating another entity, no? Uh, to add to the equation, no? That when there is seeing, there must be a seer. Okay, but where is the seer? The seer is not there. Okay, the seer is not there. So the problem of empiricism, as we can see right now, is very similar to the problems of idealism. And that is by creating another entity unnecessarily, no? By creating a self distinct from phenomena, we are creating the problem of dualism. Okay. And of course, no, this problem no, has led to number one, solipsism, or the idea that we are the center of our universe. And number two, no, that it can lead to the idea that we are apart from nature and that we are not part of nature, that nature serves to fulfill our needs. And so we can abuse nature. We can recreate nature. We can destroy the natural balance in ecosystems. Okay. So what's the solution? The solution is always the middle path. We have to find the compromise between idealism and empiricism. And the Buddha has done that, no, brilliantly by simply pointing out the truth, no, that there is no self and that everything is empty. By empty, we don't mean that they do not exist by themselves. I mean that they do not exist at all. Okay. By empty, we mean that they do not exist independently from everything else. Okay. By empty, we mean that uh, things in the natural world, for example, are real only to a certain point. Okay. They are here right now. They won't be here 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now. No, these things are all impermanent. The things that we put value into, money, wealth, relationships, they're all impermanent. They will all pass. And the more we cling on to them, the more we suffer because impermanence now is the nature of things. And why do we say that? Impermanence is the nature of things because everything is a process. Everything is a process. It's not solid like a mechanical view of the universe. No, it's not solid like that. Everything is a process. A product of causes and conditions. And the self is part of that process. You cannot get the self or the foolish notion of the self to be apart from that process. It's part of the process, no? And Buddhism, no, we call that the alaya mind. The alaya mind is actually that part that actually experiences all of these changes that happens, no? At this present space and time, okay? The alaya mind is actually part of the process, no? It's not actually something that exists independently of any other thing. Okay. What about other people? Well, they are also alaya minds and they have their own processes. So what am I saying here? Okay, the solipses, no, are correct in one point. Okay, that the world as it appears to us is seen through is seen by us, no? Uh it's or our consciousness, no? It is perceived by our consciousness. But what about other people? Well, other people also have conscious minds. They're also minds, the alaya mind. And they're also conscious of the world, no, as it appears to them. Okay? By world, no, we do not mean just a world of ideas or just mechanical material things, no. By world, no, we say that it's a process. It is a combination of so many things, no, coming to a certain balance, no, that we're experiencing right now, no, or that we are experiencing in the here and now. And now, I am an alaya mind. What about my neighbor? My neighbor is also an alaya mind, and we're both experiencing the world, no, as it appears to us, no. And even if we communicate, even if we have a relationship, for example, okay, let's say we have a very special friendship, no, between us, okay. But no matter how deep that friendship is, that person, or it's very misleading now, but that mind can never see the things in my mind, and vice versa, because the things that appear in my mind, no, is unique to myself. See how language actually distorts things, no? There's no self, but I have to talk that way because our language presupposes that there is a noun, no? That has to be connected to a verb, no? Or to an adjective. So our language is actually dualistic. Okay? So anyway, what we're saying is that the world as it appears to me is unique to myself, and so is it with my friends, so is it with other people. Now, you might say, does it mean that we're all not connected? No, we're all connected in a certain web of relations, a network of relations, no? And I'm reminded of the story about Indra's web. Indra's web is that everything is composed of this complex interconnections between one gem and another. The gem now would be my mind. Okay, so the whole network of minds, no, is the big mind. Okay, it's the big mind. It's the Buddha mind. Okay, but my own mind, no, as it appears to me right now, no, given certain causes and conditions, is just a small part of this network. Okay, because in the description of Indra's web, no, the 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 web, no, is interconnected, is all interconnected to a jewel, and that jewel would be our mind. Okay, so there are billions and billions of jewels out there, and they're all interconnected, no, through Indra's web. Okay, and all of this, no, is undergoing. It's not absolute, no, it's not still. It is always. It's not static. It's always flowing. There's always a movement. And that's how we find the compromise, no, between idealism and empiricism. Okay, that in a way we are solipsistic in a sense that we only have access to the things as they appear to our mind, and that we cannot share this, no, things directly with other minds. We can describe it, we can use language, we can use art to convey things, no, as they appear to us in our mind. But it's just a representation, it's just a language. And languages are never the thing in itself, okay? Or the things that as they appear to us, no? I cannot just share my mind with you, although I'm trying to do that, no? To share certain ideas, no? By use of language, which is always clumsy. I would like to say more, but I cannot. I can only use words, no? And appropriate words, no? That may that may shed some clarity, no? It is never absolutely it doesn't actually contain what I want to say. I'm just using approximations. Just as the Buddha had to resort with skillful means, no? And just as Jesus Christ had to resort to parables, no? When he wanted to talk about heaven and God the Father, okay? Because ordinary minds like ours, no, cannot actually comprehend all of these things, no? So they have to use language to convey these meanings to us, okay? In the form of superstition, in the form of mythology, in the form of stories, okay? Metaphor. So these things, no, the alaya mind, as they are all interconnected in this web, no, we can say that they are monads. Okay. And what I'm trying to say here is that monads would be the compromise, no, between solipsism, no, and I am the creator of this universe. I am the center of all things. To empiricism, which says that everything is plural, everything has a independent existence of their own, and that we just have to put one and one together, no, to create building blocks of matter, to create things, no, as we see them in man-made and natural worlds. Okay, the compromise would be something of the two, monads. It's fascinating because I never thought of Leibniz as actually very influential, no, especially in Dharma or in spiritual philosophy. But now I'm beginning to see, no, that the Alaya mind are like monads. Not exactly as Leibniz, no, has described monads to be, but something like that. Something like that. Do you have any questions? Okay, so that's it for now. We're going to resume our discussions next meeting. Next meeting, we'll talk about uh, dependent originations. Okay, that would be a good topic to discuss, no, for the next meeting. So, all for now. Gasho, Mitofo.